So, the flick kicks off in 1899, with our guy Alexander living it up in New York City. Dude's a mechanical engineering professor at the university and an inventor on the side. He's obsessed with cracking the code on time travel. His buddy Philby thinks Alexander could land a cushy job at a top-notch company, but nah, Alexander ain't the type to clock in for anyone else. He's all about his invention. One day, Philby reminds Alexander he's supposed to meet up with his girl, Emma. Right after Philby reminds Alexander about his meetup with Emma that evening. Hearing this, Alexander bounces with Philby to his crib. As he's about to head out to see Emma, his housekeeper, Mrs. Watchett holds up a ring. She knows Alexander too well. He always forgets something in his rush. So, they hit the park, and a florist tries to sell him some flowers. When Alexander turns back, he spots the first car of the era and is totally gobsmacked. Cars were unheard of back then. Everyone was rolling with horse carriages. The car's owner explains the car stalled and needs a quick fix right there in the street. As the car gets moving again, Alexander stops it with the handbrake. The car owner thanks him, admitting he often forgets about the handbrake. Alexander realizes he's late and dashes off to see Emma without the flowers. Emma's there, skating and waiting. She teases him about being late and asks about the flowers he promised. Alexander sheepishly admits he forgot them because he got distracted. He's ready to pour out his heart but gets all shy with folks around. Emma suggests finding a quieter spot in the park. In a secluded area, Alexander finally proposes, slipping the ring onto Emma's hand. But then, out of nowhere, a thug shows up, robbing them of their watches and wallets. The guy eyes the ring, and during the struggle, he fires a shot, killing Emma. Fast forward 4 years, and Alexander's a recluse, buried in his secret invention at his home lab. One day, Philby shows up out of the blue, dragging Alexander out of his funk. Philby tries to console him, saying it wasn't his fault and he can't change the past. But Alexander's not having it. He's like, "You're wrong, I'm gonna prove it." Philby's skeptical, but Alexander's determination is unshakable. Philby is practically forced to check out Alexander's discovery. This is where things get real. Alexander tells Philby to come back in a week because he's close to completing his discovery. Philby agrees and leaves. Alexander preps himself just like he did the day Emma died. He pulls back a large screen in his lab, revealing a massive time machine. He fires it up and travels back 4 years to the night Emma died. This time, he gets to the park before Emma. When she arrives, she's surprised to see him early and asks about the flowers he promised. Seeing her alive, Alexander hugs her tight. He wants to tell her something important, but she suggests going to a quiet spot in the park again. Instead, he takes her on a horse-drawn carriage ride to the middle of the city. He tells her to go home and wait for him, promising to come by later. Emma agrees, but asks for flowers first. He stops to buy flowers, and while he's doing that, an early model car nearby suddenly starts moving because the owner didn't apply the brakes. The spooked horses from the carriage cause a commotion, and tragically, the carriage runs over Emma. She dies again. In the hospital, Philby visits and feels sorry for Alexander. Alexander realizes that no matter what he does, he can't change Emma's fate. She's destined to die. He thinks maybe future science can crack this puzzle, so he decides to travel forward in time. During his journey, the locket with Emma's picture falls out of the time bubble and ages rapidly, disintegrating. He lands 132 years later, in 2030. By then, people have built habitats on the moon. At the New York Public Library, he looks up books on time travel and meets Vox, a holographic librarian. At first, Alexander thinks Vox is a doll, but he's shocked to see Vox moving between screens. Even as a scientist, Alexander is baffled by Vox's advanced technology. He asks Vox what he is, and Vox replies that he's the repository of all human knowledge. Vox offers to answer any question, so Alexander asks why he can't change the past. Vox explains that the time machine hasn't been invented yet, so he doesn't have data on it. Vox shows him famous articles about time machines, including one by Alexander himself. Alexander learns that he disappeared in 1903 after writing about time machines, but no one ever saw a working prototype. Since his disappearance, he's been presumed dead. Frustrated, Alexander leaves the library and continues his journey into the future. Suddenly, there's a violent jolt inside the time machine and he stops abruptly. The king says, "This is humanity's future now." He reads Alexander's mind and sees the reason behind his time travels. Using his mind-reading abilities, the king gets the full story behind Alexander's time travel and the burning question that drove him so far into the future: why can't he change the past? The wise king finally answers, "There's a reason behind everything we do. You built the time machine because Emma died. If she'd lived, you'd never have created it. Emma's death was necessary for the time machine to exist. That's why you can't save her." Alexander gets it. The king returns his time machine and says, "Go back to your time." But Alexander realizes he can't save Mara with the king around. He gets an idea and asks for his watch back. As the king reaches for the watch, Alexander grabs him and drags him into the time machine. He fast-forwards through time with the king hanging outside the machine, causing the king to age rapidly and die. Stopping the machine, Alexander finds himself 60 million years in the future. The world is now dominated by the Morlocks, who have destroyed nearly everything. Realizing the horror of this future, Alexander decides to go back and save Mara. He arrives just in time to free her from the Morlocks. He reaches her, frees her, and they make a run for the time machine. As they escape, the Morlocks chase them. They escape to the surface, but the time machine jams, causing a time imbalance. A loud blast erupts and the machine explodes, killing the Morlocks as they rapidly age and die. Alexander and Mara survive and meet up with Kylan. Mara and Kylan lead Alexander to the place where his time machine initially landed. It's the spot where Alexander's house once stood, unchanged by time travel. Because time travel changes time, not location. Meanwhile, back in 1903, exactly a week after Alexander's disappearance, Philby visits his house as promised. Finding him gone, Philby speaks to Mrs. Watchett. She says Alexander has found a place where he'll be happy. Philby tells her to take care of the house until Alexander returns, though both know he never will. Alexander chooses to stay with Mara, living 800,000 years in the future. They begin to rebuild a new life together, embracing their new world and the future they will create. The movie ends with a shot of the evolving future, watching as Vox educates the Eloi, symbolizing a new hope for humanity. Make sure to subscribe, comment, like, and share.